الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى اللهم وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم يا معلم آدم وإبراهيم علمنا، ويا مفهم سليمان فهمنا، ويا مذكر يونس ذكرنا. اللهم رب الناس، رب جبرائيل وميكائيل، فاطر السماوات والأرض، رب كل شيء ومليكه، اهدنا لما اختلف فيه من الحق بإذنك فإنك تهدي من تشاء إلى صراطك المستقيم. اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا، وعلمنا ما ينفعنا، وزدنا اللهم علما وعملا وتقوى وهدى وتقربا وتبصرا يا رب العالمين. وبعد. So this program is offered by the Elixir Fellowship. It's a project that I've been hoping to get off of the ground for some while. If we get the time at the ending, we'll speak a little bit more about it. But the point is, this has to do with a critical analysis or study of worldviews, and then we will be getting into liberalism. So that's the idea of the topic today. The objectives are as follows: to have a critical understanding of the dominant worldview today, which is liberal and secular in nature, as well as having an overview of the Islamic worldview, and then the intersections between the two and their oppositions with one another. As for the benefits, there are many. Some of these are as follows. Let me just close this right here. Yeah, okay, perfect. Now, number one, it allows you to understand a correct understanding of how to understand Islam and understand that which opposes it. The Islamic worldview is different in many ways from the liberal worldview, and we'll get into what that means. It's also important to have basira, to have insight while giving da'wah. Other benefits can be an appreciation for a compelling critique. So we're going to be trying to develop through an actual exercise of how to be critical when you're thinking about things in the correct manner. Because there's different ways to be critical. There is a positive way, and then there is a very cliche way of being critical that falls within the dominant worldview. It should also be incorporated within the tarbiyah of our children. We're aware that these significant differences are there. So our selection of material that we expose our children to, or the types of environments we provide for them, that is extremely important for our children, for ourselves. So that's the second layer of benefits. It also, when you have somebody who is your opponent, whether that be intellectually or civilizationally, it's important to seriously study them or take them seriously. It's not enough to have caricatures. So usually when we talk about these words, these are catchphrases today: modernism, secularism, liberalism, the isms, right? Feminism, right? Communism, capitalism, right? But to be able to understand them properly, and then to be able to critique them is important. Right? Again, the problem is online, you see people using these phrases and they don't necessarily understand them. Neither do they represent them correctly, which leads to major problems. And this is something you see happening not just within the isms, but you see it happening against other religions. You see people speaking about Christianity and not really knowing what Christian faith is, what biblical scholars have to say, right? And the same thing can be said about other religions. So if you want people to accurately represent Islam, you should be able to accurately represent them in their arguments. Okay, as for the content today, then it'll be the following. We have section 1, which is a worldview. What is it? Modernity versus Islam, and particularly touching a little bit on post-modernity as well and what that means. Comparing it, some of its features, we might not have time to get into the features. It'll depend on what the time frame is. Then we'll be moving on to what is the secular. What is the secular? An account of liberalism after that, And there's different types of accounts. There's a theoretical account, so a philosophical account of liberalism with Islam. Well, the Islam part will be later, but it'll be a philosophical account of liberalism. And then we'll have a brief historical account of liberalism, as in its history, its development. Then we will have its criticism. And that's what we're going to try to cover. As for section 3, the relationship with contemporary Islam, how to survive it, and so on. I'm not promising this section. Cool? What I'm promising, inshallah, with the minnah and the karam of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to cover is these 2 sections for today. And these are the important sections. Right? The other stuff you can find online. So you go to Blogging Theology, listen to different podcasts by different speakers that do a really good job. Listen to Imam Tom, right? Listen to Muhammad Jalal, the one who runs Thinking Muslim. His podcasts on blogging theology are quite instructive on the matter, right? So this last section is well done, well documented. It's out there. What lacks usually is more of a foundational understanding of these matters, and then engaging with them at that level. And even then, mind you, we're keeping it brief, keeping it surface level. Not too deep, but not too shallow. Somewhere in between. Okay? Next thing I know, somebody says here, but like, oh, you go to a sociology class and there's so much more. Well, obviously, it's an entire tradition. There's half a millennia worth of material on it, and progression, so on and so forth. There's going to be a lot more involved than what we can cover here. Cool? Any questions about the content? Going once, twice. We're not coming back to this now. What is a worldview? What do you guys think when you think of a worldview? Any takers? The word worldview. It's in a lot of usage today, right? Before, the word ideology would be used more. And today, the word worldview is used more. Reason being, ideology has more baggage attached to it now, because there's been lots of failed ideologies, right? And so people attach radicalism, which is again a feature of secularism, but other such things to the word ideology. So what do people prefer today now? The word worldview. Cool? What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of worldviews?
The lens through which you view the world.
Very good. The lens through which you view the world. It's more like, so when you take off your lenses, can you see? A lot of the times when you're looking for your glasses, where are my glasses? Where are my glasses? What happens? They were on your face the whole time. Because you failed to recognize that you were able to see through them, because you're just seeing. It's like a fish. If a fish that's in water, if you ask a fish to describe water, they're not going to be able to. Because what is water? I've never seen it, even though you're flowing through. So it's very difficult to be able to engage or even address or to separate certain things, particularly worldviews, because worldviews are just so deeply fundamental in terms of your beliefs about the world. It's really hard to separate them. And that's why when Muslims are put on the back foot about the worldview, all of a sudden they're starting to doubt their entire life. Right? So our job is to be firm in our worldview, in our aqidah, in our beliefs. In fact, give them da'wah, engage them, make them doubt, make them come, make them see. Right? And again, da'wah has many forms. Right? And that's why you said one of the objectives is basira for da'wah. Not necessarily everybody needs to be engaged like this. Right? Sometimes you just gotta have a good sit down. Sometimes, it's through different engagement. But the point is, it's very instructive for you as one who is, inshallah, the rising generation, there to support the ummah, to support yourself and your families. Right? This is very critical. Okay, so it's the most fundamental beliefs that you have about the universe. They're so fundamental, they're baked into your existence. Everybody has a worldview. If anybody says, listen, I'm critical, I'm unbiased, etc., that in and of itself is an inherited worldview. It's a feature of modernity. It's a feature of modern thinking. To think that you are unbiased. There's no such thing. There's always a level of study that can be critical and unbiased, but you will never truly not have a bias. Let me give you an example. If we're studying the Quran and we're studying the claims of its authenticity, will there ever be a point that if somebody said, look, I've brought something similar to the Quran, challenge the Quran, say for instance, even though the challenge technically is not at that level anymore because the experts are gone of that time period, right? But say for instance somebody says, oh, AI, ChatGPT, or the newest thing has brought about the latest challenge, will we seriously take that into consideration? Like, will we say, okay, like, I mean, yes, at some point it is the exact same? No, we would attack it. Do you follow what I'm saying, right? And we would look at it critically, right? And we would come from the position that the Quran is true, right? We would not come to it from, listen, I'm on the fence. Is it true? Is it not? Because that in itself would be kufr, right? Just like that, when somebody else comes to something, they have a bias. Then you have to convince them over, right? So there's no such thing as I'm critical and I don't have a hold of belief. You hold something. You hold a worldview, right? Skepticism is a worldview, right? And if you become a complete skeptic, well, then you reach the level of Nietzsche and you lose your mind. Who's the truest skeptic, right? Anyways, everyone has one. It reflects the big questions of human existence. So the way you deal with these big questions of life are depending on your worldview, right? It's the conceptual frame of reference on how people look at the world. Another good example is language. How many of us here are bilingual or multilingual? Mostly everyone here is bi or multilingual, right? When you first speak one language, and then all of a sudden you realize this can be said in a different way in the other language. Before that, you never realized that this concept could be portrayed in a very different way in another language. So you are thinking in different languages. There's lots of research that shows that this allows you to develop multiple pathways of thinking. Okay? So the worldviews are the language of your thinking. They are the language of thought. Worldviews are the language of thinking. They are like languages. They just operate. A child will never be able to tell you exactly when he learned how to speak because they just learned how to speak. They might tell you it was difficult for me initially, but then once they do speak, like anybody who doesn't have a speaking disability, may Allah to help everybody, inshallah, give them shifa, make it easy for everyone. But the point is, anybody who doesn't have something of that nature, they're never going to be able to tell you precisely when I could speak. It's just like when you're learning a new language. Like when I learned Arabic when I was pretty young, like 12, 13, I can't tell you exactly when I started speaking and I started reading. I can't tell you exactly where I got that because خلاص يعني اكتسبت, I got it. I can't tell you now because now you start thinking in different languages. Do you guys follow what I'm trying to say? Okay. So thinking, though, the language of thought itself is a worldview. And in today's world where you have a dominant one, it's very difficult to sometimes detach yourself from it because it just is. You don't question it. You might not even think that this is something that can be questioned, or there is an alternative, or there's something else involved. You won't. Okay. It's a paradigm, shapes and forms our experiences of the world. Your first person experience of the world is shaped by your worldview. And we're going to get into that. One person can be sitting and say, I had an hallucination. The other person says that I had a spiritual experience. The next person says, I'm not entirely sure what I saw. Right? But whatever it was, I saw something. All three are built off of a worldview. One person says there's truth to all religions. The other person says that means no religion is true. The third person says there's only one true path to God. Right? All are perspectives on worldviews. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Mary, you guys with me? Yeah? Okay. Muslims are more cognizant of the fact that there's different worldviews. Why? Why are we cognizant? Because we've inherited different languages of thinking. We have the Islamic way of thinking, and then we have the non-Islamic ways of thinking, of different worldviews. And so you see that they're constantly clashing with one another, right? Like the question of hijab, right? Why do you do hijab? It's my choice. Okay. But say, for instance, if it wasn't your choice, does that make it now okay to not wear hijab? Right. My dietary choices, I choose to eat halal. Okay. But say, for instance, you chose not to. Because the premise here is choice. The premise here is free choice. If you choose not to, then that means, is it okay morally? And what does that mean? Do you guys follow what I'm saying? Right? So you're trying to justify something that you've inherited from another worldview in another worldview. And those two don't align. Right? Okay, moving on. For time, we said what? 140? This is how long this session is supposed to be? Yeah, خلاص, ماشي. I just took it on as 140. I extended it. Okay. So here I'm gonna hit you with some big words. And these words, don't be scared of them. They're very simple. They mean simple things, but you just got to know these words. They mean very simple things. These are the components of what a worldview has. These are the parts of a worldview. But don't think of them as separate from one another. They're not. They're all part of one. Because what a worldview is how you think, right? You don't really question it. It's just there. So don't think of them as separate things, but they are to be studied separately to be able to distinguish them from one another. Are you guys with me? Right? So they're not separate. They're not distinct, but we're distinguishing them for academic purposes. Okay? And this point will be very important moving forward. The first is ontology. It's fancy for what exists. What is it? What is it? That's the question of what is it, is a question of ontology. What exists? And so obviously, as theists, as people who believe in God, the most relevant or highest portion or the most prioritized study of what exists would be God, which is theology. Which is theology. Okay? Who is God? Right. Next is the question of how do I know it? So what is it? The next question is, how do I know it? Which is the question of epistemology. What is knowledge? Epistemology is what is knowledge? How do I acquire it? The knowing of knowing. What is right from wrong? What is true knowledge from false knowledge? Accurate knowledge from inaccurate knowledge. Truth from falsehood. How do I distinguish these from one another? This is the question of, what is it? The question of? How's it pronounced? Epistemology. Okay, very good. So I know what it is. I know how I know it. The next question is, what does it do? Which is the question of anthropology. Right. So the question of what does it do is the question of anthropology. And particularly here, we're concerned with man in the world. Right. When it comes to the man, we call it anthropology. When it comes to the world, we call it teleology. When it comes to the man, we call it anthropology. When it comes to the world, we call it teleology. Now, all of these fields that we're talking about, when you're studying them in a worldview, they're just assumed that certain things are the way they are. Let me give you some examples. Anthropology, when we study anthropology today, we just assume evolution, materialism, that the only thing that there is material, okay? And that a religion is false, and that it's man-made. It's man-made. It's a construction of human society. And so within these assumptions, you study humankind. And then you set off with certain premises, and you move from there. A lack of society, socialization, civilization's building, etc. Right? And then within that limited range, you have different things, which would also shape how you know what you know. And we'll get into that. But just as an example, do you guys understand? So today, when we think of anthropology, we don't think of the philosophical question of what does a man do? What is the purpose of man? Rather, what is the nature of man? Those aren't the questions. The question is, how did the material sack of cells known as humankind evolve to where they are and get to where they are today? That's the question that comes to be. Not the question of, what does a man do? What's the purpose of humankind? Do you guys see the difference? Is it clear to you guys? That's clear. Yes? Okay. When it comes to more than just the man, to the world and your position in it to the universe, the cosmos, existence, then it's the question of telos, teleology. Right? What is our telos? What is our maqsad? What is the purpose of being? What is the purpose of existence? Mine and everything around me. Okay? This becomes the question of, what does it become the question of? Guys? Teleology. Very good. Next one is after that, okay, so I know what I know. What exists? I know what it is. How do I know what I know? What am I? What meaning or purpose do I have in this world? Then the question is, how do I know right from wrong now? How do I know right from wrong? How do I know evil from truth or goodness? These are the questions of morality and ethics. How should I behave in alignment with my understanding of right and wrong? Right. And remember, this is building off of all of the previous questions. They're not separate from one another. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Okay. The next one is, if I know how to behave, I know what's right and wrong, how do I then organize the people around me in a fashion that fits with how I know what I know? How does the world around me then make sense of it, which becomes law and politics? What does it become? Law and politics. It's the ideal political and social arrangement of the world in alignment with the previous questions of your worldview. And the last question is, what is beauty? What is beautiful? How do I define something that is like, we all find certain things attractive, certain things non-attractive. How do I go about defining that in alignment with my worldview? Right? So today we just take it as granted that, what do we say? We say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Right? This comes from a particular worldview, right? That is subjective, that there is no such thing as objective morality, and hence there is no such thing as objective beauty. Right? And these questions have overlap. These questions have overlap. You can't separate them from one another. Yes.
So is this set up in a way where it's like a tiered, almost like you're slowly breaking it down?
Yeah, so it's like the most important to not necessarily tiered in terms of priority, but yes, there is a priority in terms of knowing, because if you don't know one part, you don't know the next. The problem with modernity is, you see this fine line right here, guys? This fine line right here? It exists for them. There's this really clear line that's going from here to here between. Oh, sorry about that. From here and here. Modernity says, excuse my language, to hell with all of this. It doesn't matter. I can ask myself these questions by themselves. They have nothing to do, like this has nothing to do with this, and this is a product of their worldview. This is a product of the modern worldview. We'll get there. We'll get there. Yeah, so basically all the questions that are metaphysical in nature, which is called metaphysics, as in beyond the physical, ma ba'd al-madda, right? Is called metaphysics, and anything below that is called the physical. So that's how they separate the two from one another. Okay. So these questions, ontology, theology, epistemology, anthropology, teleology, these all become metaphysical questions, while the ones of morality, ethics, law, and politics and aesthetics become questions of the real world. And notice the word real is me buying into the paradigm or the structure, which is this is real while this is unreal, less real. Do you guys understand? Language is part of the thought language, which is your worldview. Okay, if that's clear, let's move on to a contrast in comparison between the two. Any questions on this? Like, what does this mean? Any questions? Yes.
I guess similar to my other question, is ontology just the most general term study of what exists? That's very broad.
It's the most broad area, right? As in, it will have to do, like you'll see when we start to contrast and compare, you'll see. Okay? Yes.
Why is the who is God question ontology or like theology and not anthropology?
Because anthropology has to do with what or who is man. What does it mean to be human? I guess we could rephrase, oh wait, it is there. What does it mean to be human, right? What does it mean to be human today can be discussed without a discussion of God. What are human rights supposed to be? A discussion of the world without God. Right? Human rights are supposed to be a championing of the idea of humanism that is secular in nature. Right? And so this discussion can be had today without God. My point, though, my contention, the contention of Islam and traditional religion in general, but particularly Islam, the only surviving religion in its traditional format, is you can't separate. Because so you as a Muslim are having a hard time asking, how can I relate purpose without God? While for a modern or a postmodern, that's not a question. It's everybody has their own perspective. Do you understand that? Right? Okay. Mumtaz. Modernity, and I won't speak too much about it because these are all interconnected. Modernity, liberalism, secularism. I don't want to spend too much time on this. But the point is that modernity is a language of thought today, and it is supreme. It is dominant. So it's so hard to separate. Like even talking about modernity is really difficult. And the reason for that is because how can I describe water to a fish? We are all fish in a water. This is a dominant worldview. So to be able to dissect it, separate yourself from it can be difficult. Just like how liberalism can be difficult, philosophical liberalism, to discuss it can be quite difficult. Like, sure, I can talk about economics. I can talk about, social rights. I can talk about, all the hit points of like the right and left. That's fine. But the very worldview that is underpinning it, its foundation, that's really difficult. Right. Okay. Also, it's really important to understand that it's a man-made project and it's not organic. It didn't come from the entire world, Asians saying something, Indians saying something, Arabs saying something, Africans saying something. No. It's very particularly a European project. It's a European Enlightenment project that was then exported through the world through happy giggles in American capitalism. No. It was given through colonialism, violence, and genocide. Right. And they said, because our historical trauma is XYZ, this is the right thing for you to. Right? And because we believe that this is the truth, this is the objective truth, this is universal in nature, it's encompassing, so hence everybody needs to accept it. So we will use it to give it to you and to also take everything you have in the process. Right? And then call you third world countries. Right? Yes. There's a question. Good. How the world perceives the world, people view the world. Okay, from ontology to theology to teleology, modernity says that these topics don't have anything to do with the latter. Okay, colonialism, terror, with a smile. Very good. Colonialism, terror with a smile. Mumtaz. And thinking that it's the white man's burden to give everybody their enlightenment. So at any means necessary, it's the white man's burden to give them enlightenment. Okay. What happened here? Moving back. I set up. Like, it is native to the Western European experience and it was exported to the world. All right, let's start contrasting, guys. First part, ontology, right? What does that mean, guys? What is ontology? Huh? Study
Of what exists.
of what exists. Good. In the Islamic worldview, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most central reality about the existence of the world. Everything else surrounds it. All knowledge, every other category is in the gravity in the ecosystem and the gravitational pull of this one fact. Your spirituality is one with the very fact that God exists. Your very being is secondary to it. Your existence is contingent on His. Jalla wa ala. Your ethics are one with it. Your purpose is one with it. Everything else about the world, about existence, about it is secondary to it. So if you were to, I should add this as a slide, but if we were to compose a diagram of knowledge and of the world itself, that includes ethics, that includes teleology, that includes law and politics, that includes everything else, these would be revolving around the central gravity of the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because from it comes everything. From it comes fulfillment. So Tawheed is the greatest fact about reality itself. Not just the universe, not just the cosmos, but being. Being itself is God. And then within it, everything else makes sense within this one fact. This is not a fact. This is what compels you to be a human with purpose, a human with spirituality, a human with ethics, a human who has responsibilities and duties and rights towards the Lord and the world and society and its makeup and organization. All of this is upon the one fact that Allah is who He is. In the modern worldview, starting with this one fact, it's not available. It is an innately worldview that does not see it to be an objective truth that is reachable. It is unreachable. It's not available. It's like an error in the system. You cannot apply God to the modern worldview because it's supposed to function without Him. You could believe in God, that's fine. But God will never be part of the picture because the picture is limited to the empirical natural world, which is the second point. The natural world is what is dominant, is the only thing that exists. It's an eminent framework. What is it? It is a eminent, not with an I, with an E. Right? An eminent framework, as in everything that can be perceived or is within that framework. So like if I say that there is a sea, and at the end of that sea, I know as a solid fact, because humanity has always known, we've always experienced, we know as a solid fact, our very being exists on it. We can't make sense of ourselves without knowing that at the end of that sea lies a land that we've never seen. That is our homeland, which is Jannah. And that the path to it is the path of God, sent down through the prophets, finished and completed and rectified with the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ for all of humanity. I know this. I have to know this, or I've learned it. I've explored, I've understood. I now, naturally, I'm going to get on a boat and I'm going to travel towards it. And I know the boat is provided by the Quran and Sunnah and the Sharia. And my fitrah calls towards that land. It calls towards it. My compass is showing me true north. While the landscape and everything is to be traversed by the mapping of the Sharia. This I know. The modern who's standing beside me, the next person will say, listen, man, I can't see that. All I can see is the island that I'm on here. So you know what? I'm going to make sense of this island without the need to think of my travel beyond what I can see. And this is the modern worldview, if I was to simplify it in a nutshell. Everything else pins around it. Liberalism, secularism, all the other isms, they all revolve around this one idea of eminence, right? That it is within the eminent framework that one exists, and anything beyond that is not of a concern to that level. So hence it is deprioritized. And that's why the empirical natural world holds the most weight in the modern worldview. I'm not talking about the postmodern. The postmodern is a bit different. It's a critique of the modern, but it still holds on to its principles. It's like an evolution of the modern worldview. That's where you get gender politics. We'll talk about that stuff later. But the point is, this is why, what are true sciences? Tell me, what are true sciences? What's the most respectable science? Physics. When you think of like true science, you think about the bigger questions of the world, they have to be and must be answered within the paradigm of physics. That's why Einstein and Newton and these figures are the prophets of science or scientism, the worldview that revolves around science, or a prioritization of it in the way you perceive the world. And so that's why you see quotes by him. And that's why enlightenment revolves around these later figures and their quotations and so on and so forth. And that's why people will say, well, you know what, Einstein used to be a believer, or Einstein, etc. It's like, okay, like Einstein has nothing to do with any of these things. Why? Like, why? Because it's the truest of sciences. It's a study of the physical world through the physical. The principles of the physical through the physical. It is the very essence of modern study of the world, physics. So it's the most respectable. And I need to study it within the realm of the natural. It cannot go outside of that. Anything outside of that is not real science. You know, that's why design or the design argument within biology is seen to be non-scientific, because it cannot be an explanation of the world, because it must sheerly only be physical. That's it. Not to say it doesn't have its benefits. We're not saying that are these sciences beneficial? Of course they're beneficial. But we're saying that it is the worldview behind it that develops you to think and only think in this manner. Because science can easily be incorporated in Islam. It has been historically. Okay? There is no contradiction in the sense of doing science, or methodological naturalism, which is the technical term for it. Right? Okay, now the supernatural world, the unseen. So in the Islamic paradigm, this is called alim shahada, the seen world, that which can be perceived through the five senses: touch, taste, smell. What else? Hearing. Huh? What else? There's five senses, right? Sight. Very good. What's the sixth? Your mother's sense. Yeah. Okay. Or woman intuition. Right. All right. The next one. So when it comes to the unseen realm, the supernatural world, in the modern worldview, it is utterly denied. It has no space whatsoever. Right. Oh. We should change the thing on it. All right. My objective is to be done this portion in the next 30 minutes, 20 minutes, and then what's it called? Open up for a Q&A, inshallah. Well, we've been doing Q&A, right? Okay. The third section to the ontology is the unseen realm, which is alim al-ghayb, the unseen. So for us, it's the very words unseen, alim al-ghayb. Ghayb is that which is not clear, okay? As in clear to the physical senses. but it's still clear, as in it's there, it's believed, it's understood, it's factual. Like I will interact with my life, with my world, knowing that this is real. This will shape the way I am. It's not lesser than. While in the modern worldview, it's absolutely denied. And in the postmodern world, it has its benefits, like how psychologists and others say, well, religion is very beneficial. It allows people to be nice. It allows people to be good. It's a tool for society functioning right, because not everybody can be as genius and smart as us, as being atheists and still believing that you should still be good, and whatever that means, whatever good means, right? Or like psychologists, you'll say, yeah, religions, there's some truth to it. It's called perennialism. Perennialism. All religions have like this essence of truth that must be taken up. They all share it, right? And that again, perennialism is a project of modernity, just like how secularism is a project of modernity, just like how philosophical liberalism is. Philosophical liberalism, everybody had their own take on it. You have capitalism, so classical liberalism. You have Marxism, so it turns into communism and other things. These are the other takes on philosophical liberalism. These are all different projects of modernity. Modernity is the deen, and these are the madahib. Modernity is the deen, and these are the madahib. Some are madahib that have to do with iqtisad. Some are madahib that have so economics. Some are madahib that have to do with fish. Other pictures, right? The end of the day is they're all madahib. They're all different madhabs of the same deen. Way of being, way of seeing, way of knowing. So in the postmodern, spirituality has its pace, but you know what? Not organized religion, whatever organized religion even means, right? Like not organized religion. So I'm fine with my yoga and my oracle balls and talking about astrology and does your what's that stuff called? Like which month you were born in somehow?
Horoscope.
Huh? Horoscope, yeah, so that stuff is it holds value. There's position for it, but within the secular. Do you guys follow what I'm saying? Within this construct, right? We'll get to it anyway. I don't want to overlap the other sections. Moving on to the third is resurrection and judgment, al-ma'ad, the hereafter, right? Moral accountability. This is, again, remember, you cannot separate moral, ethical, knowledge, or ontology from one another. They are intrinsically one and the same. Like, they're together. And the linchpin here is existence of God, knowledge of Him, and then everything He gives us. And so for us, we have no problem with the five senses and the alim shahada, the seen world, but the alim al-ghaib is just as real, and in terms of knowledge, just as important, and in terms of shaping the way we see the world, right and wrong, just as important. And likewise, for our purpose, it is of a higher degree. Are you guys with me? Okay. So al-ma'ad, the moral accountability of the hereafter, paradise and hellfire, are necessary for us. Not only because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us about it, yes, that's true. That's the primary reason. You need to believe in it. But also because rationally, life would not make sense without it. Ethics would not make sense without it. Morality would not, because you cannot make sense of a moral world without the hereafter.
Depends on what you think is.
Yeah, exactly. It's not only is it subjective, but you cannot make sense of evil, nor can you make sense of accountability. Christians, this is why for Christians, the problem of evil is an actual problem. For Muslims, it's never really been a problem. There's so many ways of answering it. This one time I was talking to a priest, get this, a priest of the non-religious church, the church that doesn't believe in God. Sorry, yeah, it's an actual, I remember I was it was at Guelph. So he was there, part of the church of non-religion or something of that, or the nones, right? This is an entire area. And he was like, you know what? I used to be a faithful Christian. And then some, the stuff that happened in the 90s in somewhere in Africa, I think it was Uganda or something, and the mass killings of one of the tribes there, right? And so that made me lose faith in God. Right. So I was like, oh, interesting. I actually just came across this recently where Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah says that free will is the greatest gift of God. So we all believe in free will, don't we? It's like, yeah, free will, the right to choose. I'm like, yeah, okay, awesome. But so as an outcome of that blessing is that people will misuse it, and then thus they will be judged for it. And that's what's ethical. He went quiet and he just went back to his stall, right? Because it absolutely, like, if you believe in free will, then it needs to come from somewhere, and it can't be material, okay? Because if it was material, then free will doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't. So you can't be a liberal and be an atheist. There's an internal incohesion between those two things, generally speaking. You get free will, like, to be able to describe it, to be able to believe in it, it needs to come from somewhere, right? And it can't be from the natural world, or else determinism makes more sense, right? And so, what was I saying? Right. The hereafter is logical, it's rational in terms of its faith for us. Right. While for the modern worldview and the postmodern, an identifiable eschaton, a hereafter, is denied. So even in the postmodern, they say, yeah, you do your voodoo stuff, I'll do mine. I might attend like a revolutionary church that does pop songs and other things to get people into the church, right? And that doesn't believe in any sexuality anymore, right? And that's all fine because we're all for it. But to base a way of seeing society and the world in terms of a hereafter, that's outside of the realm of the general worldview. You can hold it, that's fine, but keep it personal and private, right? That has nothing to do with anything outside of it. Okay, cosmos, human life, infused with purpose. This is the question of anthropology, or yeah, the question of telos, purpose, for humankind. And for the world around us, everything is infused, is deeply impregnated with meaning. With meaning. Everything does tasbih of Allah. There is not a single portion in the heavens, the Prophet ﷺ said there is not a hand width of distance in the heavens, except that there is an angel there prostrating for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's just in the first heaven that we can see, let alone everything above it. Right? So in a modern worldview, it's empty, vacant space. Hundreds and millions and billions of light years of nothingness. Space, empty. But for us, it is vibrating majestically with the praise and the thanks and the glory of our Lord. To the prostration of beings made of light that do not disobey God and do what He says. What a different way of looking at the cosmos. Right? So it shapes the way you see. Right? So when we study, what do you see? You see all this. You see the glory of Allah. You see that a person cannot look into the sky except that their heart expand, their chest expands towards the glory of their Lord, and all of a sudden come back within themselves. Ya Allah, save me. They think of the creation of the heavens and the earth, expands them, and then it brings them back to Ya Allah, save me from the hellfire. You can't separate this from one another. It's just impossible. It doesn't make any sense. How could you? Wouldn't make any sense. So today we live a lie of separation from one another. Right? It's not how human beings are meant to function. We're not meant to function like this. Right? Like, this is the question of ontology and theology covered. Mumtaz. The next question is of epistemology. What does that mean, guys? Guys and girls, what does that mean? Knowledge, how to know what you know. Very good. Oh no. I definitely don't know about how to function with this. How do I get this back to, oh, bro. Somebody want to come help me?
Just go.
Go back to share screen.
Share screen. And
This one, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then just go and
Share.
full screen.
And then you do the views format or the presentation? View, slideshow, right?
Yeah, full screen it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, here we go. Back on. Bismillah. Now, so how do I know what I know? In the Islamic worldview, because this is our ontology. Okay. Because this is our ontology, this is how we understand what is. So the question of how to know it is part of it. You can't say what is, and then I ask myself how I know what I know. No. These two go hand in hand. So how I know what I know and what is, I can't ask these questions separate from one another. I have to ask them that they exist with one another. So as a worldview, like yes, as a philosophical study, as so on, like you can do them separately, but in terms of like actual being and existence, they wouldn't separate from one another in your consciousness. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Right. So when it comes to the worldviews and epistemology, how I know what I know, for a Muslim, the highest priority of knowledge comes from Quran and Sunnah, revelation. Wahi is what centralizes, shapes, give light to, color, and breathes the very essence of knowledge into us about the world. About how our faith cannot be separate from our social order, our fiqh cannot be separate from politics, they are one and the same. Our tazkiyah, our spiritual states cannot be separate from the guidance and the path of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I can't find a path that's separate from that. But our need of the Prophet, peace be upon him, our love for him, our love for God, our fear of God, our hope in God, our interactions with the world, with our families, with society, they must come from, return to, and function within the paradigm of Quran and Sunnah. Right. That is central to us. It takes priority for us. In the modern worldview, revelation or divine knowledge has no characteristic at all. And again, the postmodern, again, it's still the same, as in it has no function at a higher level. No postmodern is going to say, actually, go off of revelation. Nobody's going to say that, right? Even the postmodern, they say, listen, this works for you here, that's cool. This works for me here, that's cool. Like, I'm not going to claim that I know anything. So it's just skepticism. That's what, remember, initially, what did I say? Postmodernism is just an extreme form of skepticism of universals. They just have a hard time with grand narratives. They don't like grand narratives. That's all, right? So everything becomes like, listen, break it down. So everything you break it down, you have to just, power is ugly. And we'll get to that stuff when we're studying liberalism, inshallah. Yeah, no, yes. The modern is what we're studying. The postmodern is an evolution of that. The postmodern is simply just an evolution of that. Right? It's a historical evolution. It's like, think of it like this. Another way that Habermas, who's one of the sociologists from Germany, a very, very central figure, very big figure, he says that this is high modernity. Postmoderns are just high moderns. What that means is they're sitting around with their cups of teas, right? And they're saying, well, actually, this part of modernity doesn't make a lot of sense. So I'm going to push that away. But they still function within it. Like, that's still the paradigm. They just have certain problems with certain ideas, which is like, so modernity is all about, this is how they put it. Modernity is all about grand narratives. Every philosopher has a view of the entire world. I figured out the answers to everything. Okay, every physicist has their own reality of the world. Okay, every philosopher, Hegel has his own, Kant has his own, right? Everybody has their own. Postmoderns say, how can you be so short? And they start to critique and be skeptical about grand narratives, narratives that extend and encompass universals. They have a problem with universals, right? And so they say, no, everything needs to be localized, okay? And then power needs to be broken up. So power structures are innately wrong. They're innately harmful. They are intolerant. They are violent. And so power must be dispersed. So this idea is still a liberal idea. Freedom, autonomy, right? It's still a classical idea. But they say that, no, this needs to be done at every level. So society itself is harmful. So until we break down everything, we won't be able to disperse power. So feminists will say, until we break down the family structure, Okay, and you know, then you say until we break down what it means to be a woman. Okay, and then it comes down to the postmodern identity crisis, which has to do with like gender theory, queer theory, which has to do with until we break down what it even means to be a human, or a man, or a male, or a female. And these things are separate because they attach other meanings to them. So it's a constructivist society. We construct meaning within our language, within our ways of being. So these need to be taken out. That's why instead of saying he or she, we say they or them. Right? So leave it, disperse power of the constructs of language and society. Okay? This is in a nutshell. In a nutshell, this is what postmodernism is. That's not in the scope of the course, right? But in a nutshell, that's kind of what it is, right? It still holds on to the same theory. So they're just sitting there sipping tea saying, well, actually, it should be like this. And, you know, we have a problem with this. And this is how justice looks. But it's still working within a secular modern paradigm. You know, it's still functioning with all these things. Revelation has no value. God has no value. Purpose is not universal or objective, right? These things have no presence or being. It's simply with like, yeah, we're not comfortable with that stuff either because we're still moderns, but we're postmoderns. You understand? Right.
They both exist, like both of these, it's not like one dominant.
They're all moderns. They like everything you see today is within modernism. Postmodernism easily fits within the modern paradigm. Do you follow what I'm saying, right? In terms of just an evolution of it, right? The right and the left. The left is a little bit more influenced with postmodernism. The right likes to claim it's less influenced by postmodernism, even though that's not true. Objectively, that's not true because there's many examples within politics like Trump supporters, right? Trump supporters are all about making America great again and bringing back jobs within Canada. The States, right? Bringing back jobs within the States. That's actually quite against classical liberalism, which is all about a global economy. Right? And capitalism is just the far, it's just the branch of liberalism that has to do with economics, right? And so it's all about people doing what they're best at. And so it's about having the world at a grand scale doing what it does and achieving the most. So this idea is very much against classical liberalism, right? About having the cheapest goods available for the people. That's not how it. So it's not that they're not influenced, you know. Also about this idea of like, you know, children having the right to choose what they want to, right, or not choose what they want to, right, and stuff like this. Being pro-life. That like if you get into philosophical paradigms, there's a lot of overlapping between the two, right? It's not like they're separate from one another. The only difference is the right is like 30 years behind the left. That's all, and then it takes them 30 years to catch up. And then they keep pushing back 30 years. So it's not classical conservatism. Classical conservatism is different. That's a big tangent. My team will be very upset. But coming back to the point, epistemology. Reason, aql. Doesn't this like charge with the thing, or do we need to put on some charge? Will this work?
Oh, it's not charging. Yeah. Do you put it in charger?
No, this isn't the right thing, I think. Oh, here it is. It worked.
Oh, okay.
It worked.
Oh, and then you plug it.
Being very finicky.
Yeah.
طيب. Reason, aql. This is why I wanted to keep the discussions later, so that way we can get the material done. Reason, aql, it has a priority in both Islam and the modern worldview. While in the modern worldview, you have a back and forth between what type of reason is acceptable. A type of reason that's based off of empiricism, which is sense experience, or a type of empiricism that has to do more with the rational mind. These debates go into philosophy. These are the discussions between idealists, okay, and materialists, and so on and so forth. But they all are within the paradigm. They're all within the paradigm. Next is reports. Akhbar, khabar, for us is very important. Reports are very important. Why? Because the Quran and Sunnah is what is it? It's a report. Right, and so transmission is very important for us. Transmitted knowledge is very central. While for the modern worldview, it's not that central. Right, it actually holds no importance. Right, because they said everything has to do with our rational minds, with reason and the physical, sensorial world. Okay? But that's not true. It's not true. Why? Because like if I was giving a lecture on quantum theory, right? You would not be doing the experiments that Einstein did or Tom Bell did or anybody else within the field did to come to your conclusions. You would not be using reason, nor would you be using what? Empirical standards, right? You wouldn't be doing sense experience, neither would you be doing reason. You would simply be, what would you be doing? Taking my report, my transmission on reliability of my PhD, in that case scenario, in quantum physics. I don't want to do that. Or that would be the scenario, right? That would be the scenario. In reality, you can't function without true reports. You can't function without true reports. The last part is for us in the Islamic worldview, the fitrah, the primordial natural spiritual intuition is very essential. Right? It's essential as in it's a guiding factor that brings you back to Islam. Right? كل مولود يولد على الفطرة. All children are born upon the fitrah. فأبواه يهودانه أو ينصرانه أو يمجسانه. That it's the parents who either make them Nasara, Christians, Yahud, Jews, or Zoroastrians. So socialization can cloud your fitrah. Socialization can cloud your fitrah. And that would lead to you feeling empty, like most people do today. So what they feel like is that they can't find meaning, they can't find purpose, and then that leads them to exploring, right? So, anyways, moving on. Is the question of epistemology clear to everybody? Yes. Moving on. Anthropology, the question of what is a human being? What consists of a human being? This is very important because according to this, you will give people their rights. According to this, you will give people their rights or their duties, both rights and duties. Your ethical paradigm will be built off of what is a man, what consists of a man. In the Islamic worldview, you have a body. The moderns believe too, you have a physical body. Cool. In the Islamic worldview, we have a heart, we have a soul, we have a mind. Okay. For us, a soul and a heart are one and the same. Like as in, you can't separate them. If you have a soul, you have a mind. If you don't have a soul, you don't have a mind. They're one and the same. The discussion of the mind itself is actually Assalamu alaikum. I do apologize. The computer turned off. So apologies for that. Right. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know why I turned off.
I'm just going to join from my laptop.
Recording in progress.
So should I continue from here then?
It looks like we can get this one back up and it looks like it's. You're gonna plug it in, it's gonna start charging.
It's not charging properly, isn't it? Yeah, it's not charging. Let it be then.
I think it's because the cable.
I don't, where's your
The cable doesn't.
Khalas, guys, I'll just use the laptop here. I'll just use the laptop. Just give me this plugged up and I'll just use the laptop for now. And then the guys just have the Zoom open, have it muted, so that way you can look at the slides, inshallah. Cool. Do you guys have an adapter for like the Mac, the USB-C adapter or
This is
the HDMI?
That's why I wasn't charged. This is the phone. Did you? No.
It's charging.
Turn it on then.
Listen, let's use this now.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine.
This one was for this.
Good thing we have 6 hours, right? Well, less now. How many hours do you have? 4? 4 p.m. 4 hours.
5 p.m.
Yeah, so 4 more hours, right? We can extend it if we need to. No, we'll be done. Don't worry. The brother in the back's like, what? How are you, brother? How's everything? Alhamdulillah. Your name? Huh? Hello, mashallah, tabarakallah. You're studying here, working here? Sorry? Okay, mashallah, very nice, mashallah.
Question is where are the slides?
The slides? I sent them to you. I don't know.
This isn't me.
Guys. Okay, brothers and sisters, can you please get out the the slides? Yes? Okay. Oh, that's good there then. Khalas,
I can
then.
get it here.
Okay.
Recording in progress.
Yeah.
What's happening?
So this one I've connected here. So if you want to unshare, I can share here. That way it syncs between.
Yeah. Stop share. What's this question here? Oh, there's a question. both modern and postmodern separates existential questions of God, objective knowledge, humanity, and purpose from moral ethics laws, whereas Islam unifies these as we believe they are connected. Modernism.
Sheikh, you're muted.
Okay. Jazakallah. Naam. Jazakallah khair. So if you get these down, if you get these fundamental principles down, you will have a very easy time understanding liberalism, secularism, and all the other isms. You'll be able to pinpoint where they are on the map, okay? Where their ideas are coming from, etc. If you're not able to do that right now, you're going to have an extremely difficult time moving forward because you're not going to know where these things are coming from, how to make sense of them, right? Okay, so keeping in mind the concept of rights and duties, human rights and human duties, okay? We both agree there's a body. We both agree there's a mind. They don't agree on a soul, while we do. But remember, the very distinction between soul and mind is a practice of modernity itself, to escape the question of the soul. Because if you look at the discussions of the ancients, like Aristotle, Plato, Neoplatonists, Muslims, Islamic thinkers and philosophers, and so on, you'll see that the question of the soul is what is discussed, not the question of a mind. The very concept of a mind is not there. Here, let me give you an example. In Arabic, what's the word for mind? Arab speakers. لا ده خطأ. عقل is the rationality. Aql is rationality. The word mind is added to it later onwards, and it displaces it in modernity. But the aql in traditional sciences or in the traditional works, if you go back 500 years ago, 400 years ago, the word aql is simply for reasoning, rationality. Right? هذا عقلي. This is a rational thing. Right? عقلنا, to do the process of rationality. Aql is not the mind. Aql is rational reasoning. Today, because of the modern worldview, the mind and the rational mind are the same. The mind and the rational mind are the same. And the reason for that is a divorce of everything that we've discussed before. from everything that is. So the only thing that is the physical, and part of the physical is the mind. As for the soul, because the soul has to do with its deeper connection to the universe, to God, to a creator. So the word soul has more baggage in the modern worldview. And so the modern worldview can accept the soul. And so the soul is not part of the discussion. The first person, or one of the first people to discuss this way, was Descartes. Famously, what did he say when he sat down to say, let me be skeptical of everything, right? Let me doubt everything. And then what did he, so cliche, what did he say? Huh?
Yeah.
I think, therefore I am, and hence the mind can be separated from the concepts of the soul, and so on and so forth. And psychology is built off of that. So is all other studies of that area. Please let me finish, inshallah. Write your questions down. Please write them down. Mumtaz. Language for us then is central. Language is a miracle. How can human beings speak to communicate ideas of this nature, of complexity, of abstract thinking about the world, about theorizing science and all these other things, about God, about the world? How can you do all that? You do it through language. Language is the medium of speech, while the worldview is the medium of thought. Okay? This in itself is a miracle. It cannot be explained. And even moderns today cannot explain it. You cannot explain it on a Darwinian theory. Why didn't we develop what dolphins do? Signals. Or what killer whales do? But it's just signaling, right? If at the end of the day, why language? And then why different languages? How are we capable of doing this? Why is it that I can't explain to you why I can speak? You know, this in and of itself is a big challenge to modernity. And so hence, language is not as central in modernity. But in postmodern worldview, they use language and language theories as their base point for critiquing modernity. Right? We're not going there, but just keep that tad bit in mind, okay? So language is central to us. Why? إِنَّا أَنزَلْنَاهُ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا لَعَلَّكُمْ تعقلون. Right? We revealed the Quran in clear Arabic, eloquent Arabic, so that you may rationalize, understand, when you may know epistemically. Right? So language is central. The very Quran, its miraculousness is linguistical. Its miraculousness is linguistical. Or is it because it talks about the Big Bang? And that وَالسَّمَاءِ وَالطَّارِقِ طَارِقِ is talking about pulsars? No, it's because of the language, right? It's not because of modern scientific miracles that makes the Quran true. Weak arguments are very harmful, especially if your worldview is not functioning correctly, right? That means your operating system has errors in it. It's confused. Okay? La ilaha illallah Rasulullah. The last part, so hence, if we have a body and we have a soul, and our languages take priority, and we are morally responsible, as in we are innately, part of being human is to be morally a moral agent. Part of being human is to be a moral agent. That means my rights in my Charter of Rights and Duties look very different than the UN Charter of Rights and Duties that are used to kill and genocide Gazans and have that bastard of a child, Netanyahu, sit in UN and kill thousands in Lebanon from yesterday and make that call. That type of rights is the product of a liberal, modern, postmodern world order. Those rights are not the rights of a Muslim. Neither are the rights of a Muslim worldview where Islam is superior and is the dominant worldview, in which rights or duties are balanced for Muslims and non-Muslims, where everybody has a place to function in this world. That's very different than the killing of hundreds of thousands in Gaza. Now, so this is an anthropology of an Islamic worldview and a modern worldview. Okay. The defining features, as I said, we'll bring them back later onwards, inshallah. Okay? Disenchantment, rationalization, secularization, alienation, atomization, commodification, decontextualization, individualism, nationalism, subjectivism, objectivism, universalism, reductionism, mass society, globalization, homogenization, therapeutic motivations. We don't have time to get into them, inshallah. Next time, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Or we could come back to it if we have time at the ending. You can just read them, but these are certain features, certain like functions, certain sifats of modernity within the world, and we all experience them. We all grow through them. Why is it that it's okay for a child to leave his parents behind when they grow old and go live in California while their brother and sister lives in Calgary, and their poor parents are here in Toronto fending for themselves into their late 60s, 70s, and they have all sorts of diseases and stuff? Why is that okay? Why is that acceptable? Why is that not immoral? Why is that? Why is there a family dysfunction? Why are people so atomized? Why is it that when somebody goes through a divorce, their entire life collapses? Why don't they have support systems of deep family ties and community? Why do these things not exist? Because these are just certain features of atomization. Okay, your first and foremost services is to be a loyal citizen. The very word citizen is loyal to the state, to being commodified. Anyways, we'll take the break here, inshallah, before we move on to what is secular, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, and into this section of the worldview, which is the last part. We'll discuss this, and we'll discuss liberalism, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. On time? Let's pause, inshallah. We'll take a break of how long? Come on over and do the formal take a break thing. You look up. 15 minutes?
Up to 2:15.
Up to what?
2:15.
2:15. So everybody online here, we're taking what? An hour break? It says we're taking an hour break. I'll open up for 15 minutes of Q&A. Okay? And then after that, we'll take the break. Mashi? Seems like I'm setting the schedule today. Yeah. So the people who had questions before, and then we'll come to the more about question.
So we were talking about the mind and the separation of reasoning, but would it be more reasonable to think of the Islamic concept as like having consciousness and it's not thinking?
So sorry, I didn't have time to expand. But in the Islamic consciousness, you have the ruh, the soul. Then you have the jasad, you have the body. And when these two come together, you have the nafs. So you have the nafs that is in this world. So the nafs of this world is us, with a soul and a body, right? And the consciousness is a mechanism of the presence of the soul in its full form, right? So, you know, when people reduce the conscious mind to neurological pathways, and they say this neurology solves consciousness, this is consciousness, that's not possible. Why? Because number one, you're assuming a materialist explanation. Number two, you're saying that, okay, what's to say that, you know, the consciousness is there, the soul is there, but a part of it, because the vehicle that you're driving, the body that you're driving has been smashed a little bit. So there's a bit of a problems in the car now. Does that make sense? Right? That doesn't mean that you don't have a soul or a conscious mind that is immaterial. So consciousness is actually one of the frontiers that atheists despise, because it's one of the last domains that they want to strongly contest, right? Which is the conscious mind. They want to say, look, if the mind is material, if it's just neurological pathways, and we can explain it through it, then that means the body is the only thing that is. So that there's no soul, there's no conscious mind. The conscious mind is, there's different theories, but the conscious mind is material. It's an emergence, or it's a product of material processes, and but you can't explain it, right? Like if I make a phone, right, and I say now all of a sudden this phone will turn into a cat that is living. Okay, I can't explain. I need to have a process to be able to explain the material processes that led up to the cat. Right? Or taking a rock, rubbing it, and turning it into butterflies. Right? This is the equivalent of saying that material processes that are blind and dumb and cold can cause consciousness. right? You can't explain through material processes consciousness. You can assume it, but that's on your worldview. You don't have any proof for that on even your worldview. You're just assuming it, right? So anyways, that's a little bit to do with consciousness. I wrote a paper on the intersections of the therapeutic, the psychological, and in between, worldview building. And there's something that's more palatable, something that's more easily digestible by Sheikh Abdullah Hassan on Muslim matters. It's called, what's it called? Do you know which one I'm talking about? It's called the theologies of the mental health industry. Theologies of the mental health industry. That's more palatable. While the paper I wrote was for the masters, so it's a little bit more jargony. Like there's more terminology in it, right? But if anybody is within, psychology or the sociologies, I can share it. It's not well written, but there is an argument in there to be digested. There was a question in the back. Yes. Mm-hmm. Sorry, what? Yeah. Yes. Very good. You see, because of the whole breakdown, I wasn't able to explain that. But Jazakallah khairan, that's another point that I should have clarified, which is that for the modern, morality or ethics is not essential. It is not a part of the framework of what it means to be human. Rather, it is incidental. It is a trait that is taken up for the functionality of society. But if we were still Stone Age men, according to their theory of the evolution of mankind, then you wouldn't really need it. And that's why this is how you can explain through evolutionary theory why women stay at home, why men go out, why children should be obedient, why. And you explain morality, you explain the respect of elders, you explain all these things because they had to do it to get to civilization, right? So it's incidental, as in it's there because you need it for the functioning of society, else it would be anarchy. And true anarchists don't exist. Real anarchism, nobody really calls for real anarchism. Else you would have situations like that movie, the well-known one about anarchy. You know, the one where once a year the energy goes off, laws are lifted, the purge, right? And what's it called? Everybody just was. So that's the vision that they have of mankind. That's the vision that they have of human beings. They think the nature of human beings are absolutely evil, bestial, and because we're just monkeys that have come to be, right? And so there's nothing essential about the human being that's moral or ethical, right? It's more incidental, as in it's a trait that's taken on for the need of society, right? That's why you need the modern nation state. You need a strong ruler, which is today the modern nation state, to keep rules in check, to keep everybody on the same page, else everybody would be chaotic. That's not how Islam worked, right? But anyways.
So when I was hearing, I recently heard basically where the topic was basically liberalism is dying and it's going to be replaced by biological determinism.
By biological determinism.
Yeah, i.e. like everything, there is no free will, there's just biology that's controlling us.
Okay.
Determinism.
Okay.
Would you say that's a good topic?
No, I would say that would just be a project of modernity. At the end of the day, it's part of the deen. It's just another growing madhab. Do you follow what I'm saying, right? It's the same deen. There's no difference. It's working on the same principles. Liberalism is just another madhab. Do you follow what I'm saying? For us, it is the ruh. It is the qalb, the lub. These are different words for it. So you can call it the aql, but you have the word qalb for it as well, which is the heart. So the ephemeral, psycho-spiritual, rational heart, okay, which is effectively the consciousness mind. Do you follow what I'm saying, right? The lub, same thing. The lub, and so the discussion between the fuqaha of where is the heart is a discussion of where is the mind, but it's a discussion of the ruh, Do you follow what I'm saying, right? It's a discussion of where the central focus of the ruh, right? Is, so some say it's here. Some say it's actually coincides with the anatomical heart, right? And it's there. But the point is, we're talking about something other than the materialistic concept of a mind that is separated from a soul. We're talking about a soul that has a centrality, which is the heart or the mind. Do you follow what I'm saying? For the sake of distinction, there is a distinction in the sense of the ruh can be detached from the body, but in terms of what comes to be is the nafs. Do you follow what I'm saying? Islam. Okay.
Trying to confirm how, with all these projects, worldview, et cetera.
No, the worldview is modernity.
Yeah.
The projects are of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
They function based off how, and because you're saying that they don't answer that.
They deprioritize them. They say these are not part of our considerations of the world. The world is the physical, and the eminent, not the physical, the eminent, as in. Anyways, the difference is more technical. It's more semantic in the sense of like Charles Taylor, who's a central philosopher of modernity, who's actually Canadian. What's it called? This is his theory that it's eminence. Well, because if you were to say it's just physical, then there's many philosophers like Hegel, okay, and others who follow in his footsteps, such as the late German philosopher. They were all Germans, also, all the Continentals, Kant, Hegel. The guy who ended up taking the wrong side of World War II. And so that's why he's not read as much. Starts with an H as well. Heidegger, others, right? Nietzsche as well. Ironically, all Germans, right? They what's it called? Some of them did believe in a soul. Some of them did believe in these things, but it's not part of the paradigm of considerations of politics, ethics, and law and order. Do you follow what I'm saying? These questions are still separated from these questions. So you might have some fancy way of trying to make sense of the world, but that's separate from your law, politics, and so on and so forth, right? You either end up in some of these camps later onwards, right? All right, another way of putting postmodernism, the other question is that it is a rise of the skepticism after World War II from the great killings and the great disappointments of the projects, of the promises of the projects of secularism and enlightenment, right? So that's why you have certain critiques of it by Derrida, by Foucault, by other philosophers as well. Okay. Yes.
These man-made spectrums. And I was wondering, on the spectrum of positivism to constructivism, where would Islam sort of lie, like, or Islamic teachings, where do they lie?
So positivism is based off of an extreme radical perspective of materialism, of empiricism. It's not empiricism because empiricism still invites rationality, but empiricism is just a prioritization of the empirical over the rational. You have ulama from our turath who were empiricists, like Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi is considered empiricist in the sense that in the makeup of prioritization of knowledge, he would have prioritized sensorial knowledge in terms of understanding the world over pure idealistic or ideals of the world. Constructivism is not a way of knowing, okay? So positivism is a way of believing about the world. Constructivism is based off of a criticism of all that came before, right? So you are constructing ideas. They are saying these things are not real, okay? So effectively, it's a, you could call it the twin brother of positivism, because it's still assuming the material world to be real, and the only thing being real is the material. And so hence these ideas and notions attached to it, such as gender, okay, such as family, such as all these other things, who gets to decide if I'm a man or not, or a woman, or an animal, or so on and so forth, right? These things are notions that are attached to the physical. So the only thing real is this. So it's not really outside of the paradigm. It's within that. It's not separate from it. Like it's still functioning within it, right? For Islam, the sensorial has a priority. It has its epistemic place. It has its value in terms of sentences and so on and so forth in the study of science. It's not that it doesn't, but in terms of your worldview, it would not become scientism, right? It would not become a type of way of seeing the world through and only through this vision, right? The Quran and Sunnah would take priority in how you envision the world. Do you know what I'm saying? So your worldview is still shaped by the Quran and Sunnah, the exceptions of the rational, the aqli, and the empirical, the hissi, but it wouldn't be saying that, no, put these all out and structure your entire way of seeing, existing, believing upon just the physical. Do you follow what I'm saying? Right.
What I understand, positivism is sort of objective, and then constructivism is more subjective, and it's like positivism is more generalizable, and like at least when it comes to research. And so
no, it's not. So positivism is not science necessarily. Positivism is taking the scientific method and saying, I'm going to apply this to everything about the world. So, when it comes to God, can you prove him through eating, touching, smell? If not, then he's not real. Do you follow what I'm saying? I'm going to apply it to how to function about the economy. If it's giving me this, then it's right. If it's not, then it's this. Do you follow what I'm saying? It's taking a specific method and overgeneralizing it. Do you follow what I'm trying to say? While constructivism, yes, it leads to subjectivism, and it comes from the need to be skeptical, but at the end of the day, it's not rejecting materialism. Do you follow what I'm trying to say? It's not saying, well, is there material or not? It's obviously assuming that we're in the material world, and it's prioritizing material over anything else. Do you follow what I'm trying to say? It's just a method. One is sociological, while the other is an effort of people who overvalue science and build a worldview off of it and saying that we're going to apply it to the world. And it's an utter failure. The very founders of it back in the 90s said, yeah, it was an utter failure. But yet they ruined lives of millions through it, right? So that's kind of it. Positivism is taking scientific, it's what scientism is. Anybody want to take out a definition of scientism for me very quickly? Wikipedia very quickly. What is scientism? To me, that science is, Google it, seriously, Google it. Yeah, somebody. Very good, very good. That's literally, so positivism is the mechanism or the tool of scientism. Cool? Yes.
Like in your example about the physicists, where they use color, like I'm not going to study, but I'm going to let someone who has a PhD in quantum physics, or the person who has that PhD in quantum physics is really based on their intuition. So when you go and do a lot of upper math, a lot of it you'll see patterns, you build an intuition where you know the right answer, but you can't really explain why. And they're trying to codify their intuition through the theorems of this pattern that they are seeing. So I don't know how they view intuition, but intuition plays a big role.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. Within the scientific method itself, it plays a massive role. You would never go anywhere with science if you didn't have an idea or an inkling, be like, hey, maybe this is how it is. Let's try it out. But in that scenario, they wouldn't call it intuition. Do you follow what I'm saying, right? Or it wouldn't have any epistemic weight. Do you get what I'm saying, right? In the sense of it being like, what I am basing my very conclusions off of. Like even in the math example, you can't say, well, how did you reach this conclusion? That's not acceptable. Do you follow what I'm trying to say, right? But in the Sharia, right? If we're using intuition synonymously with the fitrah here, then yes, there is space. But later onwards in history, we have certain figures like Ibn Arabi, Shaykh al-Akbar, that they call him, not really, but that's what they call him. And he based an entire theory of knowledge off of intuition, which is kashf bin hads. So I directly get inspiration from God, and this is my intuition. And so hence, because of that, this is prioritized over knowledge from the Quran and Sunnah, right? There's an interesting story that, of Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, who was a staunch Hanbali scholar of fiqh and also of tasawwuf, but later onwards, kind of his tariqah took a certain way, where it says that Shaitan came to him in the form that appeared to him in his dream as God, right? And he said to him, "Oh, Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, you have won. You have reached a level now that you do not need to worship me anymore." Just the way as many later Sufis claim that, listen, we've reached a level of truth and reality and spiritual experiment and taste that we don't need to worship God through the Sharia and pray and so on and so forth. So that's why you have all these funny stories of, Sufis saying, listen, my body's here, but my soul is in the Kaaba doing tawaf, so I don't really need to pray anymore and stuff like that, right? So what did Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani do in the narration? He spit on him and he said this could never be the case, right? And all of a sudden he saw Shaitan for who he was and the dream ended, right? But the point is, there's an extreme, right, which leads to a decay of knowledge, which did happen in the post-classical era. So from the 1500s onwards, like from the 900s onwards, from 1000s onwards, in the Hijri calendar, you see a deterioration of knowledge of the Quran and Sunnah and of the classical sciences because of a prioritization of this type of tasawwuf, right? Which led to our books being taken away from us by the Europeans, which led to not an evolution of our sciences, which led to all sorts of things because of all these different factors, right? So you need to place it properly. That yes, it holds weight. It's your closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but not at the cost of following the Quran and Sunnah. Do you follow what I'm saying? Yeah. Who, sorry? Yeah, of course. I mean, the different, it's well known that Ibn Sina and Ibn Rushd's works are pivotal within the Vienna Circle, which is one of the first places of the Renaissance. The Renaissance happens in Italy originally, within the Vienna Circle, and they are very vehement. Like, what are they discussing? They're discussing Ibn Rushd and his understanding of Aristotle. You follow what I'm saying, right? And the same is with Ibn Sina. فعلى كل حال, it's just a lack of attributing things to the right authors, and racism, and so on and so forth, and etc. But guys, we will actually take the break now. Barakallah fikum. Please pause the recording over there as well, and we'll come back with the night. So, we're good? Bismillah. Everyone can hear me online? 2:30. Are we good? What time is it right now? Okay. 2:30? Okay. ممتاز. الحمد لله العلي العظيم الذي له ملك السماوات والأرض وما بينهما. وصلى اللهم وسلم على خاتم الأنبياء وأشرف المرسلين محمد بن عبد الله القرشي الهاشمي عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين وأنا معهم برحمتك وكرمك ومنك وجودك يا أكرم الأكرمين. وبعد. Before we move on to the next section, there's a point that I'd like to make that is of importance. I want you guys to picture a graph. And on that graph, there is a point at which you reach critical mass. That then becomes the turning point for your vision of the world, as in your worldview. We've discussed that one of the linchpins for that is the paradigm of eminence. The other for this is the divorce or the Cartesian split between the epistemic and the ethical. Now, I know before we mentioned that the ontological is also part and parcel of this divorce, but the one that really brings about the changes is in the divorce of these two. When fact becomes separate from value, when the ontological, in terms of its study, is separated from the ethical or the moral, this is when you truly see modernity at play. And a really good book to read on this and its consequences is Reinstating Orientalism by Wa'il Hallaq. And Imam Tom does a good job. Honestly, he does a better job for The Impossible State, but he does an okay job for going through, I think, the first couple of chapters on blogging theology as well. But I would still suggest you read the book, right? Reinstating Orientalism. And this point, you see its effects in the genocide of knowledge. So like we need to expand the term of genocide to include types of knowledge, right? Well, where all other knowledge is to cease to exist and to be corrupted at the expense of and the primacy of the modern knowledge, right? And its effects on the world. Orientalism is just one of its mere, instantiations. And I think we also did a podcast for Mac on this topic.
Yeah.
So you guys have a podcast?
Yeah, Root Revival.
Yes, Ruh Revival. And we did a podcast on this where we got into this particular issue. Now, there's other books that you can read on this as well that go into the moral dilemma that you end up facing. And that would be After Virtue by McIntyre. But again, I wouldn't suggest any of these readings if you haven't done fiqh properly, you haven't done aqidah properly. When I say aqidah, you haven't reached a level of aqidah where you can study the sharh of Ibn Abil Izz, rahmatullahi ta'ala alayhi, upon the Tahawiyya at a level where you can interact with it. Ideally, reach the level of the Asfahaniyya by Ibn Taymiyyah, but that's higher. But at the very least, you could do the sharh of Ibn Abil Izz. If you haven't reached that level, then I don't suggest studying further than this course in terms of the fields of the sociological and the others, because again, these are just fields of aqidah. So if your asl is not there strongly, if you can't make sense of your own tradition and your own creed and your own belief, then what are you doing studying something else, right? It will cause more confusion. It will be detrimental, and it will not be constructive. And I don't mean it in the postmodern term, right? For your own growth, to do that without studying the traditional sciences, including fiqh, aqidah, tazkiyah, tafsir, and hadith, and mustalah al-hadith, right? So at the very least, these and a bit of balagha, a bit of shi'r, just basically have a traditional training, right? So those primary training should be there for you to engage further, because again, you need to be able to access these. Like again, this is coming back to that split of the epistemic from the ethical. For us, knowledge is ethical. For us, knowledge is deeply ingraining of what it is. So you can't be doing a study of this without knowing where you're going ethically. And how you know where you're going is through the Quran and Sunnah and through the tradition. Right? So, and also you can't, if you don't have a cohesive internal logic, okay, you're going to face the problem that we're talking about, which is you can't make sense of anything else. You can't expand your vision to be able to analyze from the outside unless you have a cohesive internal logic of your own tradition, right? Let us begin now. So everything else, keep these points in mind. Some of these bigger points that we mentioned, the split of the epistemic from the ontological, from the ethical, right? Which, and being able to, trying to think of them as separate things that can exist by themselves. Do you follow what I'm saying, right? Like this very central thing is what leads to, and again, you see reflections of it in our tradition. Bab al-ilmi qabla al-amal, the bab of knowledge before action in Bukhari, right? The definition of ilm with the ulama, the definition of iman with the ulama, right? That iman is qawl wa amal wa i'tiqad. Iman is belief, declaration of it in action. It's a praxis. It's a praxis, right? It's not just an x-axis and a y-axis. It's a z-axis. It's a paradigm. You can't separate them from one another in real 3D life. Action is part of the praxis. You can't separate faith from action. And وهلم جرا, يعني this is the reality, right? You can't do that. So to think that, okay, I'm going to be, these things are of benefit to me, if I don't even know how my salvation is working, and where my spiritual state, in my understanding of the world and around me, in my place of taqwa and tazkiyah, if that's not there, and I'm not fulfilling my duties and my wajibats, if I'm not doing that, then what right do I have? Come back to rights. Yeah, what right do I have to do this? No, you don't. You don't have a right. You have a right of takhassus after you have done the basic stuff. Okay, so just so that's out there. Just so that nobody comes after me and says, I went to Nu'man's program and I came out a deviant. طيب. ممتاز. Section 1. Oh, this could technically have been a separate section. So don't get caught up in why is this not a separate section. It's a separate study of what is the secular, built off of everything we've just discussed. Bismillah. Admit. Can you also be on as a admin to start admitting people? Yeah. Okay.
Don't worry, there's people.
All right. So scholars have previously taken a soft stance on secularism until recently, where the impacts of modern day secularism has reached a critical mass on the lives of Muslims and on our religion. So if you look at what many ulama had to say about secularism before, you had kind of like a split, right? You had people, or even in the general masses, saying, listen, is secularism really that bad? I mean, it's the separation of church and state. Is it really like, it's beneficial for the people? Basically, it was so ubiquitous, it was so widespread and deeply understood that, well, the secular project is the way of enlightenment. It is the way to success in this world, that people, many people, if not most people, had the persuasion or the posturing of, look, it's okay. We can work within the secular paradigm. We can work within it, and it's fine. We should be practical about these things. We should be practical about the world order. We should function within it. Do you follow what I'm saying, right? Not to say that there's no practicality or pragmatic perspective of actually doing stuff and doing activism and being active and so on. I'm not saying that that's not there. What I'm saying is, even they bought into it, even theoretically, right? Even in terms of aqidah, in terms of belief and faith, or believing in it. And anybody who took the position of no, secularism is absolutely haram and it leads to kufr, well, you're a radical, right? And you're a Wahhabi, and you're Madriyesh, and you're extreme, and why? Because it doesn't fit the secular paradigm, and we'll get to it. Okay. So, and recently, especially in the past 10 years, so from 2010s onwards, and after the ummatic trauma of post 9/11 and what happened to the world after that, specifically, where you had the invasions of Afghanistan, of Iraq, the destruction of our homelands at such a level where people were like, okay, well, these cracks are starting to show within the dominant liberal world order, right? And at the center of it is to see that, okay, secularism is problematic, right? And also, at a more general level, if we're not talking about Muslims, you start having the same problem with secularism by the 1980s, where people are like, clearly, there's something wrong here, because you've been telling me since the 1600s that if everybody just accepted modernism, became nation states, accepted nationalism, then religion would just fade away, it would fizzle away. But the 1980s saw a massive return to, the late 1970s, early 1980s saw a massive return to religiosity across the world. So within the West, in America, you had the massive growth of the not the evangelicals, the TV, they're called the televangelicals, right? Because they were supposed to be evangelicals, but because they used the television, so their entire mission was on the television of like evangelizing North America again, right? So you saw a massive wave of that in the 80s, and then in the Muslim lands you had the Iranian Revolution and its acceptance, and then you had the revolution, the false Mahdi who came and did what he did at Mecca in the Kaaba, and so it really shook kind of the world in different areas of this like, well, a re-spiritualization, a re-religiosity within the world order. So people were like, hold on, I think you were wrong, right? Clearly you can't split out religion by having a world order of nation states, because that's not happening. So, and it's been 50, 60 years since the World War II, right? And so there's something wrong here. So anyways, at that point, then you will start having a discussion of like a post-secular discussion of, and where do we go from here within the larger academy, within the general Western academy, and then particularly within the Islamic paradigm, you have the post-Arab nationalist era. So we're talking about the era where you have Hosni Mubarak coming into power in Egypt after the fall of Jamal Abdel Nasser, and the destruction of the projects of Arab nationalism and unity on that cause of Arab nationalism. And so you see like a political project as well of trying to reintroduce Islamist and Islamicate thinking within the people, so that they could justify their rule off of certain other principles. You see the same thing happening across the Gulf, across the Arab world, and so on. And then you have genuine care, and then you have ulama being put forward across the world, within Pakistan and Saudi, across the world. This is called the Sahwa, the revival, right? And so it is deeply political as well, as it is ethical, as it is so on and so forth. So you don't separate one from the other. And you see this going on. So you see these different strands appearing within the world at this point, right? You see a shift towards it. You have rulers of Muslim countries saying, we believe in political Islam. We believe in an Islam that is deeply political, deeply ethical, deeply spiritual. Contrast that to a post 9/11 world where you have everybody going the other way. You have the Abrahamic faith. You have secularism again. You have heavy loaded despotic behavior, right? Killings of scholars and of activists and so on and so forth. So anyways, this is kind of like a general history. I didn't have any of this planned out. But moving on to the definitions. When we speak of the secular, there are three terms that you should keep in mind. You have the secular, which is secularity. So when you use the word ty as an adjective here, we're speaking about a worldview, a persuasion, a perspective. And this is, you could say it's synonymous with modernism as a worldview. So if you think of a hadathi, you think of an ilmani. If you think of a secular, you think of a modern, right? These two things, these are persuasion, these are worldviews. So secularity is a worldview. Mumtaz? It's a way of experiencing the world. You go out, you go for a nature walk. Wow, beautiful nature, majestic nature, a beautiful mother nature, rough mother nature, torturous mother nature. So you're giving all of this like attribution of like will and agency over to blind matter and nature to re-inspire yourself with something inside here to move your heart when you don't believe in anything outside of that, right? And so a natural disaster is just that: aimless, purposeless, and without any meaning to it. There's nothing attached to it. It's just, it's so bad. How is it bad? It's so evil. I'm sorry. How is it evil? Like, according to what is it evil? Like, it's this disconnect between feeling like something is like, there's no meaning attached to anything, right? So this is a secular worldview. It's materialistic. So it's the worldview. It's called, what is it called? Secularity. Okay. So it's an ontological, philosophical perspective It's a category. It's how it's seeing what exists in this manner. Another big part of it is disenchantment. We didn't talk about it before. Disenchantment is like a perception and attitude of worldly events with no connotations that are religious or spiritual in nature. As I just mentioned, an example is of the worldview. An example of like what's happening in Gaza. Why are people coming to Islam? Because they see just how deeply meaning is attached for the Muslims and the Ghazans when it comes to what's happening in Gaza, when it comes to how they perceive what's occurring, and the type of faith that comes from it, the type of conviction, the type of growth and inspiration that they find in it. They can't make sense of it. It's beyond their secular mind state that that they're part of their worldview. They are fish within water, and they've never seen what anything else looks like. Their water is deeply irreligious. Right? And so when they see it, they have to make sense of it. When they start making sense of it, they're like, hold on, this is a different worldview. This is very different than what I've ever known, right? Christianity to me is just like the gone bys of secularism, right? It has nothing, like we have a very specific history. Well, how can these people believe the way they do when we've gone through what we did with our trauma with religion and with like totalitarian Christianity? Why is it that they have this type of faith in their Lord, in their people? Why is it that they feel, why is it that people here are crying so deeply as Muslims, where there's people who left their jobs, people who are kicked out, people still fighting, why is it that this is still happening? Why can't people forget about it the way other places can be forgotten about? Obviously, not saying that there's anything positive happening in the sense of like at a bigger level, but the ummatic sense of pain is very real. It's very hard to shut out, right? It's very difficult. It's part of what it means to be a Muslim, to have faith in God. Why is that occurring? You can't make sense of it in a disenchanted world where you experience everything in a mundane way. Like when we drink water, we say Bismillah, with the name of Allah. I drink this water. I start with that. And then when I finish, I say Alhamdulillah. All praises for God for this water. Whoa, hold on. I just drank water. That's all I did. But I had an entire etiquette to it. Of its ni'mah, it being a blessing, of us being made from it. Of it being what the throne was on before Allah Azza wa Jalla made the heavens and the earth. Of not wasting it even if you're at a running river. And I said, I took 3 sips. I followed something that my prophet from 1,400 years ago was given and inspired to do so directly from God. That's a very different experience of the world than. Do you follow what I'm trying to say, right? If you were conscious, if your niyyah was there, if you were present, it becomes an act of taqwa. Taqarrub ila Allah. And then you apply that to devastation, right? Actually, you guys have a professor here who has a book forthcoming. It's not printed yet. But it's not printed yet. His name is Dr. Basit, Abdul Basit, and his book on sorrow, making sense of sorrow. I'm forgetting what the name is, but it's a very good book, and it deals with this in a very, very nice way, right? I lost access. Anyways, it deals with this part of disenchantment in a very nice way. Okay. Now, so this is secularity. It's a perspective of like looking, experiencing. It's philosophical, it's ontological in nature. It's an ontological perspective. Do you see why you need to know words? Yeah. So now all I can say is ontological. Secularism is secularity. Now, nobody else knows what I said, but you guys do, because you guys understand what these words mean and you're constructing meaning from them, right? Okay. Secularism is the political project which seeks to advance or enshrine the secular, right? So secularism is the political project itself, okay? It's the political ethos. The principle of separation of the state from the religious institutions is the classical definition. We all know this one. Separation of church from state, okay? The sovereignty of the state and the subjugation over the religious is a more critical definition. So the sovereignty of the state and its power to subjugate and change what constitutes or defines religion is a more critical definition, right? It's showing that it's not a separation. It's a come here. I'm going to break you, destroy you, dismantle you, and continue to make you in my own image, how I deem fit. And whatever doesn't fit the way I want is radical and extreme and is not acceptable. And I am able to apply violence, kill you, destroy you, without a justification. Why? Because you didn't fit my image. Because I have power, not you. The secular has power, not the religious. Okay? That's secularism. That's the project. As for secularization, it's the historical activity of the project of secularizing the world. It's the constant separation from one another, the redefining of what the public space is from the private, okay? And what that looks like, and so on. So we'll get into this, inshallah. Mumtaz? Are these terms clear? I'm not asking anything. Are these terms clear? Yes? Okay. Jazakallah khairan, Habib. Let's go. The process of reinstating social spheres of influence from religious to secular. So constantly redefining the borders of what is the public sphere of engagement. So if I want to have a public engagement with you about a public topic, about a social topic, a political topic, what are the parameters of this discussion are set by the secular. And then constantly there's a pushing out of the religious from it. So a part of that, you know, in the past was, do women get voting rights, at least in a Christian context, right, of the West. And then you move from, okay, well, that's part of it. So that's not part of the discussion anymore. You can't even talk about that. Do you follow what I'm saying? Within their context. And then you move on to, can women work now, right? And then that becomes part of the discussion of what can be publicly accepted. And the type of arguments that you can use need to be non-religious. Does that make sense? Right? So they have to be non-religious because it's come into the public sphere, the social sphere, the ethical, moral, and the political sphere. Remember the last parts of the discussion that we were talking about, right? That sphere, to enter it, it must go through the border police of the secular, right? If they detect religiosity, radical, get out of here. Do you follow what I'm saying? You can't use an argument that is based anywhere in any shape on religiosity. So this is why when it comes to today about like abortion, right? The right is labeled as just conservative Christian. So that's how they will be labeled and seen, even though in their argumentation they will never bring up Christianity. Have you guys noticed that before? You guys ever thought of that? Like, there's never a Christian argument. There's never a religious argument. It's always, well, the child is alive. How do you believe, like, you know, this conversation, how are we having this conversation? No, because it moves in the womb and etc. I'm not saying these are wrong arguments. I'm not saying they're not good arguments or etc. But it's within the secular domain. It can't happen outside of that, right? Because the public discourse of the secular dictates that no other argument can be used. That is religious. It needs to be a non-religious one. Why? Because it's the public space. And the public is secular. You guys with me? You guys understand? Right? And we'll get more into this, inshallah. Reframing religious concerns and its purposes. So you're reframing religious concerns and its purposes. So religion before was social, ethical, political, right? It's part and parcel of everything. So you're reframing its concerns. So now it's become, like, have you guys ever seen that that image where you have the umbrella and the umbrella is God, and then underneath that there's a smaller umbrella and the umbrella is the family, or the church, and then beneath that is the father over the family, right? Over the wife and the children, right? And so that right there is showing you what the concern is supposed to be now for the religious. Do you follow what I'm saying? So religion has no domain outside of that, because the rest of it has been secularized within human rights, within etc., right? So this is your concern. This is what is acceptable discourse, and even that is being impinged on. So this is where the cultural wars are occurring, because that's being impinged on. And no, this is not. This needs to be brought into the secular dictates, right? And so gender is part of the secular dictates now, like because it's taken up a position on it, right? And so that's being argued back and forth. But eventually, we'll get over it till we get to the next one, right? Till we're talking about pedophilia, and then all of a sudden it's that, and then okay, well this one's forgotten. Do you follow what I'm saying, right? So it's a constant shrinking of what is constituted as religious, and reinstating religion and the public space as to what is the public. The public is the secular. Are you guys with me? Do you guys? Yeah. Okay. More definitions. Great. Secularism originated to separate religion and ethics in order to break away from religious violence over differences. Again, it's a history. Nothing happens in a vacuum. It's always a history. It's their historical experience with totalitarian Christianity, a Christianity that does not allow you to believe in anything else. If you live in Christendom, if you live in Western Europe, if you are under the influence of the Catholic Church, you must be a Catholic. There's no space outside of that for you. Right? And even with Westphalia, we'll come to in terms of like a outline, you are only allowed to follow the religion of your leader, of your monarch. So if your monarch is a Protestant, then you must be Protestant. If your monarch is a Catholic, you must be Catholic. There was no conception of not being on the exact same perspective. Okay? That's why Jews had a history in Britain for 1,000 years, and they were constantly kicked out. If you look at it from an anthropological, they never had a proper space anywhere in Europe. They constantly had to keep moving, right? Why? Because they were always the other, and there was no space for them in that society. Do you follow what I'm saying, right? So for them, like with all the wars, and we'll discuss, like briefly touch on those, right? Like it's so bloody, right? It's so radical. It's so bloody. They're trying to get out of that, and they're like, okay, listen, we have to separate these two. So they're like, listen, our answer is the secular. Our answer to this problem of constant wars, bloodshed, literally more than half of the population of Germany was destroyed, was killed, genocide in the 30-year wars that occurred between the Protestants and the Catholics. And it doesn't end there. The wars continue, right? Like, so like, this is, you know, the 100-year war between Britain and France was on these principles as well, that Britain had become Protestant and France was Catholic, right? So on and so forth. So the point is, religious violence, more like Christian violence, right, was to be worked out through secularism. And this is what we mean when we say that secularism or modernity is a European experiment, and it's a product of that history. Okay, secularism introduces and reshapes new concepts. It takes into new concepts and saying, look, these are our solutions for our problems, right? But then it brings about a new type of religion that does not have to do with any of those things. Do you follow what I'm saying, right? With its own flavor, and it brings about a new ethics. So it's not so it's a new type of religion. So effectively, religion today would not be familiar to the people before. Like, let's take the Romans, right? For the Romans, when they had a national festival, it was a religious one for their deities, and it was also a public one. Yeah, and if you told them the words public and religious for this, well, how would you describe this? You'd say, I don't know what you're talking about. This is how we are. Like, this is just how we do things, right? I don't separate between these two. What do you mean? You wouldn't be familiar. These concepts would be alien to them, right? Ethics as well, the type of discussions you can have about ethics today is separated from the ontological and the epistemic, because it's the divorce from fact, from value, right? From is and ought. Right? These have been separated. Right?
What do you say secularism separates religion and ethics?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, right? It's developing new concepts, new categories. Religion independently from ethics. Religion independently from the state. religion, ethics independently from the state, ethics independently from religion, right? And it's doing this with different projects. There's no one secularism is a project. Other projects are running simultaneously. Right? Yeah, there's a really good book. It's called The Unintended Reformation, right? Where it talks about how unintendingly Protestantism led to modernity, right? And how that went about, right? So this is occurring simultaneously. You have the you have the project of perennialism that they want to escape Christianity, so they're talking about other religions and how they all share the same thing, and at the end of the day, and major perennialist thinkers, right, are saying that, look, Sufism is the same as us. Sufism is the same as us, and they're like re-imaging other traditions to build off of their hatred of Christianity. Do you follow what I'm trying to say, right? And you have major figures like the French Orientalist and perennialist who says hate religion, but love its center, right? Like love the essence of what it's trying to bring to you, the golden rule, harm and don't harm, stuff like that. Like any perennial thought, right? Like all religions are the same at the very essence, the kernel, etc. There's this kernel of truth in them. That's what we're searching for. It's built off of absolute absurdity. It's a historical reading that's ahistorical. It has no proof for what it's saying. It's making connections where there are none. Do you follow what I'm trying to say, right? And it's trying to prove something that is logically impossible. If I believe in a day of judgment, in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and I believe in Jannah and Jahannam, I cannot hold at the very same instance Zoroastrian beliefs of there being two gods and one God fighting the other. I cannot. It's impossible. I can't. Rationally, logically, I can't. Right? So it's irrational. It's ahistorical, but yet it's a project that kept up speed. And then they hijacked traditions. Not to say that there's no problems with like later Sufism and stuff like that, but to say that, look, they hijacked Rumi, right? And that's why it's so cool to read him now. It's really hip, right? That type of stuff. Anyways, so these are different projects that are occurring. There's another project, a project of deism, a project of a God separate from the world. So forget religion. He's just the watchmaker. Do you follow what I'm saying? He's just the watchmaker, made the world, left it be, right? So there's all sorts of different projects that are going on. Secularism is one of those projects, right? Politics, it's reshaping politics. You're having a new concept of politics that wasn't there before, right? These are all new concepts, like they're being reshaped, re-imaged to mean something and be something. They do different things. Like religion today does something that it didn't do before. Ethics does things that it didn't do before. Politics does and is something that it wasn't before, right? And so these are being shaped by secularism. Okay, now the question is, if this is the case, then, and we've already kind of preliminarily gone through some of these problems, who gets to decide what is tolerated and what isn't? Who gets to decide that? Is it the religious? It's the power. It's the people in power, Mumtaz, and the power structure is secular, and the people making the decisions are making it off of a secular decision making, right? So who gets to decide this? What is tolerated and what isn't? And if it's intolerable, then what happens to it? It becomes radical, and throughout history, radical slowly turn into extremism, and extremism turn into terrorism, right? Those are the words. So extremism, terrorism, radicalism, right? These are the ones that the Rand calls Muslims, right? And calls anybody who doesn't associate with their type of Islam that they would like, which is secular, right? But if it so happens to be a regular white male, then is he a terrorist? No, the label doesn't fit anymore, right? But if it's somebody who is an environmentalist, then earlier on they wouldn't be called terrorists, but later onwards, due to classical capitalism, environmental terrorists. Do you follow what I'm saying? Right? The ones who do bombings, etc. But if you're white and you're a white nativist, you believe there's no space for Muslims in Britain, like Andrew Tate, right? Or the groups in the in the US, the inheritors of KKK, right? And others, well, then you're not really a terrorist because the bill doesn't fit the label. You're still functioning within the secular paradigm, and it's simply just a weapon that's used by the state to reinforce and recapitulate secular violence in its manner that it is okay. So there's a really good book. It talks about secular violence and religious violence and who gets to decide these things. I'm forgetting the author's name, but that book is also very instrumental in talking about how violence then becomes the policy in only the domain of the secular. So a policeman or an army man can be violent, kill, and do all sorts of gross rapes, pillaging, and killing. And you know what? It's still justifiable. They have their own court system. They get to decide. They get to decide what's okay. They have their own court system. Do you follow what I'm trying to say, right? They don't even come into regular courts. Why? Because it's the domain of the secular violence. It's approved violence, stamped and good to go. But the moment you bring in a universal that is not a secular universal, such as ummah in Islam, then everybody's labeled a terrorist. So the Afghan Mujahideen went from being, labeled dedicated to, what was that movie called? The Rambo, right? The Rambo dedicated to the Afghan Mujahideen heroes facing the Soviets when it was okay for them, and then they go from that to radical terrorists. Do you follow what I'm saying? And then you have 20 years of straight killing, rape, pillage, and colonization. Right. Okay, so the other question I want to ask you guys is there a precedent within Islam to separate deen and dunya? Can it be separated? I'd like you guys to think a little bit. Yes, sir.
What do you mean separate?
Good. Somebody actually critical. Very nice. What do I mean? Yes, so it depends on what I mean by this, right? If I mean in terms of vision of the world, then no. Right? If I mean, does the Sharia give us technologies, political technologies that enable us to have a true pluralistic society? Then yes. Right? Where supposedly secularism was supposed to give us pluralism and tolerance, but that tolerance is not political. Neither is that tolerance in law, in legality. Everybody must follow the same thing, just like how the Christian Catholics, everybody had to be the same. And if there is space for having different rules and laws for different people, then that's unfair. Everybody must have the same law. While in Islam, we gave full legal control over to their own communities. And you have the dhimma system. Right? You have so much going on that provides real pluralistic enablement. Do you follow what I'm saying, right? So in that sense, yes, but in sense of vision of the world, then no, right? Because the world is God's. True sovereignty is only God's. While in secularism, the true sovereign is the secular state. The will of the people. We'll get to that. We'll get to that in liberalism, right? But so you went from a powerful sovereign that Hobbes talks about. You need the Leviathan. You need that strong dictator ruler to control the people because people are evil. The human nature is nasty. And so you need that. And that then becomes, well, clearly we don't want one guy ruling like that. So it's the will of the people. It's the will of the people that is truly sovereign, which is a myth. We all know that, right? But anyways, that's kind of the point.